All right. Hi, welcome back, everyone. This is Chris Berzicki, your instructor for probably one of your classes if you're watching this. Today we're covering a large array of topics. Spend most of our time actually on professional style today. We'll talk a little bit about Microsoft Copilot as well. And then for those of you in my interfaces class, we're going to talk a little bit about Figma. But this is really all about, I mean, this is for anyone who's interested in tools, especially free tools that if you're when you're a student, Figma is available for free. It's a professional level tool that I'll go into in a little bit, but anyway, we'll get to that point. Running a little bit ragged this morning. The weather's nice. Had some meetings this morning, but uh, cats got me up at like 3 a.m. today, so I'm a little bit foggier than even normal. So, but the weather is fantastic. I love this time of year, and looking forward to a few more weeks of this before it gets a little even colder. So, anyway, let's jump into it. Where am I at here? Oops, not that one. All right, so we're going to start off talking about style before I get into Microsoft Word and how to set up some personal styles. I want to go over what we're talking about. I mean, style is not how, although professional style does include, I guess, the way we dress for work, but we're really talking about how we set up our documents and our work to look professional. And this I have found to be surprisingly one of the requests that students have had over the last couple of years. They like really want more material on professional style, which is great because that's kind of my background. And I guess I'm always reluctant to dive into it because I'm always a little bit, well, I don't want to get too far into the weeds with design, but I get excited when people request more content about this. So we'll talk a little bit about this specifically. We'll look at some resources that we have here on campus, and that may give you an idea of just all that we have to offer as far as guidance for students when it comes, and faculty and staff as well, when it comes to staying on brand. And that's really what professional style is all about, is maintaining a consistent brand throughout an organization. So, whether you're writing on behalf of, you're, as a freelancer, you're working independently, or a large organization, you want to have consistency. It is helpful from a business sense. If you're, say, when I was freelancing, I would have a particular type style and a particular signature that I had that went with my brand as kind of, and I use that term loosely because at that time I wasn't quite sure what I was doing in that respect. So, but when you're working with clients, when you're reaching out, that brand consistency, it makes sure that when your communication's coming through and it's being received, it's associated with a particular look, a particular voice, right? And we've talked about this a little bit, but focused mostly on the words, right? And how you write, but it also expands towards just the way those words are printed on the page or on the screen or what have you. So there's a lot to cover when it comes to style. And if you're watching this for the business writing class, there are some materials that I still have to get up there, but that I have to take that off of the old site and put it in the PDF. So once I'm done with this, I will get to that. I'm going to actually write myself a note. This is one of the. All right. I should be mindful to do that. Okay, so we're talking about style. Now, I'm looking at the UWGB marketing and university communications page. Now, the communications department here, or I should say the marketing and communication folks here at UWGB are amazing. In the past, I've sent them, press releases or announcements, and I've worked with them in a variety of capacities. And it's really remarkable all the work that gets done on behalf of the university through our communications folks. And so, one of the challenges that they have, and I'm kind of guessing based on my own time with communications teams, is that you're trying to you've got 10, maybe a dozen or so people. In my experience, there's about half of that. So you're writing on behalf of an organization, making sure not just that the voice is consistent, but the way it looks. And the way it looks kind of reinforces that consistency, right? So you might think like, well, boy, this is a lot of logos. Yeah, that makes sense. Colors, we may not think of that necessarily. But we'll look at that in a second. There are actually some templates that they provide to make sure. Now, these are for a variety of purposes. You can see, if you were to say on behalf of a student organization, there are certain rules. Like in this case, it has to be affiliated with UWGB. You can't just, grab a logo, grab a template, grab some colors, and say it's affiliated with the campus. You can obviously get into some big trouble for that. But they go right into the style with which they edit material. Standard format UW Green Bay email signature. So I'm actually kind of interested in that. So you can see ditch the dull default, and so you can change that up. This looks a little something like that. I have not done that because when I was hired here, I was like, oh, I'm going to put together a totally unique signature. 4 years later, I still haven't. But and some downloads. This is really helpful. So let's see. And I haven't looked at some of this yet, but I'm pretty confident I have an idea of what we're looking at here. So here's some Word templates. So if you're letterhead, report with a cover page, these are helpful for not just professional, for my side of things. I'm want to be sure that I see something about the student usage, but I haven't seen that yet. But you even have presentations here, which is on point. Like I imagine you could use this particular one would be good for like a maybe a group presentation that's coming up at the end of the semester, that sort of thing. So you've got a few themes here, and I can see, and then they have like a trying to see, let's see what else this is. All sorts of tools here, virtual meeting background, all that good stuff. I did not, okay, those are the downloads. What I am looking for, however, is a couple other things that I know is elsewhere. So we will go back to our identity tools here. So the colors, again, these colors are very serious. And the example that is often referred to is like Coca-Cola. That red of Coke is their red. No one else can use that. It may even be called Coke Red if you were to look it up. But I believe it's like, no, it's not quite patented, although that does happen. You are looking at, I think, there's a bike brand, Bianchi, I believe has a trademark on their seafoam green color of their bikes by maybe misspeaking here. But colors are important, right? And this is part of your brand. We have all seen this green. This green, in fact, I was walking by student services, that awning that's over there by the library, and I noticed that the green was a little bit off. It's a little bit brighter. I'm so used to seeing this green everywhere. It's kind of embedded. I should have had this memorized by now, but anyway, white, yeah. And then some secondary colors. These are colors that you might use in other situations. Obviously, that green and white is the go-to, but these can help. These are selected to complement and work with those primary colors, that green and that white. So you can You have a little bit of flexibility, but obviously, I think the preference is that you stick with that green and white. Okay, and there's some background colors, your off white. But again, all of these, even this barely a shade of gray here, just highlights how specific marketing teams are when it comes to style. So it's never too early to be thinking about that. You are, as we go through this, excuse me, you can be thinking about how you might want to develop your own brand, and you are welcome to use it, at least in any of my classes. That would be great to see. Logos are another big thing. If colors are pretty significant, but like that green is probably pretty close to say Michigan State. It looks awfully close, but probably a hair or two difference. But when it comes to logos, you can't mess around at all. Like you can't really touch these too much. And they give you, this is just the color treatment that you have to abide by, right? So if there's white, if you had a colored background that you're using, they show you the white, here's the black, here's the green. And I think if I were to save that image, it would show up as a PNG file. PNG, I don't remember what that stands for, but that means there's probably a transparent background on there that you can use. And I'll show you some of this in a moment. So that's the colors. There we go, the logos. Now here is, there again, there's a lot of information, going to be a lot of information on here. Who should use logos? All university offices, organizations, units, and approved affiliated organizations. So perhaps a student org. Questions about uses. I'm not sure. It still doesn't say anything about students. Excuse me. Well, that might be a question I have to get back to y'all on because I would like to check that out. So, but here's the thing. One of the best ways to determine how a logo is best used is to see examples of how it should not be used. And so you have this, and think of how, I mean, you'd be surprised how often you see these different treatments, right? So I've got it tilted on the slant here. We've got all sorts of typeface treatment and decoration happening here. We've got a shade. We've got no text, like extracting the wording of the University of Wisconsin Green Bay and adding more text to it, doing some sort of weird outlines, hand drawn stuff, and no old school logos, I guess. And this is really important. I think, if I remember right, UWGB is actually going through a rebranding at the moment where they're looking at some of the older logos. So you start to see some of those, that Phoenix, especially on the athletics. But they're trying to make those more consistent across the campus. So it is a huge endeavor, and you can start to see just why that is because there's a lot of moving pieces and parts going to this. Even down to the spacing around that logo. Like you have to have this much. Isn't specific, but the width of the G here, right? So that's pretty specific. Okay, so gives you an idea, minimum size, no less than 1 inch. I've actually seen this before, tweaking some signage for campus. The explicit direction was, the logo has to be 1 inch, and so that had to be placed and resized. And now you can download these. Okay, so here's some of the resources. All of these logos you can download and use, and it will. You have two different versions. It'll end up giving you a zip file, and I'll just go ahead and show you. I'm not going to bother trying to find it anywhere on my computer here, wherever I have it saved. But you can see here we have the stacked logos, and you have a variety, black and white, CMYK. Here is what we call a Pantone color, a PMS 343C. That's what those numbers mean there. And then you have reversed RGB, right? So You have different color schemes. This isn't a design class, so we're not really focusing on color spaces, but just as a short uh, overview, CMYK is for print, cyan, magenta, yellow, and K is for black. CMYK, that's for print. RGB is for screens. So this just makes sure that, say, if you're putting together a piece and it's meant to be printed, you're going to want to use a CMYK version because otherwise the print might look off. And vice versa. If you it's easier for CMYK to go into RGB. So if I had like a printed document, it's going to look pretty close on screen. It doesn't quite work the same way. The print to print things is very a little bit slightly much more limited than the screen color space. All right, so yeah, I said I wasn't going to get into it, but I did anyway. But anyways, it shows you just how comprehensive and how seriously brands take their style. So there's a lot of different things happening here. Oh, here you go. Student clubs and organizations aren't subject to our institutional identity standards. Students can be most loyal brand ambassadors, and they're still learning, so their use is nuanced. Okay, so I guess if you're a student, you can have fun. So, but don't avoid creating new logos or taglines. Um, yeah, that would be. So here's what we were talking about earlier. Like there's this logo, and then there's this other. The Widener has their own. So these are these other. But even just kind of curious, there's still that green in both of these. So still affiliated, and I'd be willing to bet, sorry, that this blue and this lighter green here is aligned with those secondary colors. So you can start to see how, like, if you were a student organization and you want to be as legit as possible, you're going to want to abide by these styles. Okay, and this is all the web style, and I wanted to show it. Let's show you the web style guide to see how this all kind of comes together. Now, this is when we're talking about style from this point on, we're really thinking, we're kind of keeping it somewhat limited because I don't want to get too bogged down in the weeds when it comes to the design. This is one of the reasons why I'm a little bit reluctant to, in the past, to have gone into this because I'm not I can go pretty far into the design elements and it might be a bit much, but you can what we're talking about with typography. This is what we're calling the typeface, the font. If we're going to switch over to Word here, this is our list up here of typefaces. Do I have I may not even have the recommended one. I do not think I do. I'll get into that in a second. So, and this tells you when you're creating something for like a web page on behalf for UWGB. These are the headings that you should be using. So this is Montserrat. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And it tells sans serif. I'll explain that in a moment. It should be bold. It should be this color. And it should be about 125% height, the line, which I think, not sure entirely what that refers to. I think maybe maybe that's the spacing between them. Here's the body text, color, Helvetica New, Arial, Helvetica, and so any of those fonts, otherwise like a sans serif, and any of those fonts are good. Helvetica is, which I'm surprised by, I think that's one you have to pay for. Arial is not, I believe that's in Word. And then it tells you exactly how big to make it. So if I wonder if I can, sometimes we get well, let's find out. Let's see if I can, I'm gonna open up a new tab here, and I'm going to Montserrat. Okay, so this is a Google font. I believe it's free, so I'm going to go ahead and get it. I'm going to download all of it, save it, and then you kind of have this. This is a true type font. I'm working on a Windows machine, so yours might be different. Here's italics. All right. So again, the the these typefaces are often paid for. They can often also be designed in house, right? So you have like that Coca-Cola logo. To go back to that, that's undoubtedly a trademark, copyright. That whatever that typeface is, but you can see that all over the place. When I go to Word, I'll show you a bunch of different ones. Here are web colors again. Same things. A little bit of some additional colors down here. Actually, these are the older ones. So prior to me even coming to Green Bay, here are the old web colors. And then you have everything down to the writing style. The goal is a writing style that engages readers in a conversation. This tells us a little something about, okay, what is the vibe that I want to be conveying with my writing on the web. So if I were to go to any web pages, the voice that's being used is much more conversational, slightly informal, a little bit more engaging, a little bit more upbeat. And it says it right there in that style. Like part of the style guide is again kind of creating a central document for an organization to rely on in case there are any questions like how should I approach this. There is the style guide there to help answer most of those questions. Consider your audience, speak directly. Editorial style gets you right down to capitalized program names, lowercase disciplines. So UW Green Bay psychology. This is something that worth being mindful of because this is where, and when we start to talk about style, here's another important thing. It's what we do in school is probably going to be very different from what you do in the professional world. Okay, it is an organization has its own proprietary style. So, good news, bad news, all of those things that we've been telling you about MLA, APA, and all those styles oftentimes get set aside. Still useful, but when it comes to the professional writing, uh, again, consistency is key. So you have, they tell you how to write the times, right? So there's all sorts of different little pieces of information in these style guides. Search engine optimization, make sure each page has a unique page title. You could teach a whole class on SEO, but really what it is making sure that your website and web pages stand the best chance to get found by Google or whatever search engine. Okay, accessibility, something we are definitely going to be talking about later on in the semester. UX, teaching a class on this currently at the moment, so there's lots to say there. Images, responsibility, web content, like there's all this information just to create a web page. So there's a lot that goes into these style guides and a lot of time and a lot of hands, a lot of cooks in the kitchen put these together. Just wanted to show you the print one because this is something we're looking at this week. And you can see it's a slightly different look. I don't know. I'm assuming this was printed and it probably exists in a physical format somewhere. It is a little bit different. Notice that how it's a little bit more challenging to read. It's not formatted as optimally for screens, so the type is pretty small, but you still see the same things. Preferred stacked options, secondary, word mark, single line word mark. It kind of gives you an order of preference, which is nice. You can actually download the files from this button, which is nice to have an interactive PDF. Much of the same information. right? Colors, almost the exact same thing, right? So you can see, gives you a little bit more information about student usage. So yeah, there's still a few restrictions on here, but for the most part, y'all can have some fun with those. The seal, different social media. Um, don't know if I saw that, but gives you an idea of how those should look. Athletics, photography, merchandising, all that stuff, and it gives you a little bit more. Here it goes back to the consistent style with regards to the writing. How do you write web addresses? You don't need the HTTP or the www. It's not needed or required. It is if it is clearly a web address. Okay, so hyperlinks, commas, punctuation, all the rules when it comes to style. All right, so that's pretty much in a nutshell what we're looking at, and there's a lot that goes into it. And so let's talk about a little bit, how do we start to use some of these techniques and tools for our own use. Okay, I'll get to that one second. All right, so I'm looking at a Microsoft Word document. This is using the downloaded version of Microsoft Word, not the online browser-based Office 365 version of Word. Reason for that is that there are so many more functions and features that you can do with the desktop version. I'm not sure if what I'm going to about to do is available on the online version, but I'm just going to go with this. Okay, man, dry in my office today. All right, so what have we covered so far with regards to style? Headings, typefaces, type sizes, the spacing in between. So we're going to go over a lot of the features here in Word to cover just how how styles are treated, and also how we can create our own styles. Okay, excuse me, man. All right, so the default, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so easy to see. So the default typeface in Word is like a Calibri font. So this is the default typeface. Okay, it's fairly. I believe this was a typeface that was created specifically by Microsoft for Microsoft. It is a screen focused typeface, and this is what we call. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. When we're talking about, if you remember in the style guide, I mentioned serif and non-serif, or sorry, sans serif fonts. This is sans serif Calibri. Okay, just as a reference. I think that's right. Is it sans or sans? Okay, it's sans serif. Mm-mm-mm. There we go. Okay. So sans serif font, we use sans serif fonts primarily for efficiency. When we need to read quickly and efficiently, we use a sans serif font. Um, and I'm going to already backpedal on that a little bit in a moment. We use sans serif fonts on screen, and we use it, say, on highway signs as well. And so, like highway signs, for example, and I can't remember what the typeface that they use. I actually reached out to the DOT and asked. I can't remember what it is, but these typefaces are designed for to be stylish in one sense, but also to make it easy to read. And so, let me show you. Go. I'm going to change this up a bit. Times New Roman, a typeface that was created by the New York Times based off of Old Roman writing. So I'm sure you've seen this before. So these little tails and little, get it, zoom in there any further. No, I can't. I'll just make this bigger. So these little tails that you see here, these little caps and feet, those are serifs. Okay. Now, where do you see serif fonts is usually in, I could just grab any, watch, I'll grab one that doesn't. Like any book will probably have a serif font. The way that those typefaces are designed is so that the eye carries across that line efficiently. So this is my back pedal. They're both efficient, but in their own distinct uses. Okay, so you typically, a good designer who knows their typefaces will probably avoid using a serif font online. If I could find, if I had one off the top of my head, I would find it, and you could probably see the difference. Again, what's great about some of these default typefaces is that they've been vetted, right? They've been checked, they've been tested, and they've been proven. I don't know how old Times New Roman is, but it's been around for a long time. Calibri, not as long, but it's getting a good run, that's for sure. Again, I believe this is the default for Microsoft, so this is the typeface that they use. Now, printing sans serif type is not going to end the world, right? But it is, you do want to start thinking about, okay, how does this affect the readability of things? So, um, and vice versa, a sans serif font on a printed page can be challenging to read because it especially some of them, they start to, the roundness of certain typefaces become almost distracting. So if you come across this and you find this happening, see what the typeface is and see if it's the right one or preferred. And it's one of the things that we think about in this class a little bit later on when we're talking about accessibility. We're thinking about the readability, how easy it is. We're not writing essays. We're not writing short stories or novels or poems. We're writing professional documentation, communications, and we want to make it as effective as possible. We want to make the act of reading as background as possible. We don't want our audiences thinking too hard about, eye strain and getting headaches from staring at stuff. And, that's why we have these sans serif fonts to make it easier for us to read a lot online, on screen. Okay. Let's see. All right. So these are the fonts. You probably know all this stuff already, but I'm just going to go over it real quick. If I, come on, some of the treatments, we've got bold, we've got italics. You can start to see the difference. Italics works in some ways. Doesn't you want to be mindful, especially if you're using non-default fonts or non-typical or conventional fonts, that when you're using a bold or italics, that you're doing so sparingly and not abusing it, because otherwise it can get complicated and difficult to read. Okay, so I'm going to go back, Control I. Underlining, don't do it. No one underlines anymore because of hyperlinks. We don't want to confuse things with hyperlinks. Back when I was in most of y'all's shoes, we underlined the titles of books. We just don't do it anymore. We italicize. Let's see. Yeah, you can really get into this. There's all sorts of options here. Let's, so here's where, let's say we have I'm going to show you the typeface that I typically use is called Public Sans. It is free. It is downloadable. I tend to use free fonts, but I try to make things a little bit different, make it look a little unique. This is the typeface that I tend to use. So this is, right? So sans serif font. Again, it's meant for screens. And so this is 11 points. So now if I go up, here's where we're looking at the Styles tab up here in Word. And you can kind of see as I hover over, oh, I was doing that for a second, stop doing it. If I select normal, it's going to go back to Calibri. This again is the default style. If I were to click heading, it makes it still slightly different, Calibri Light, but it adds that line height. Remember, I was trying to figure out what that was again. This is adding some space there. I think that's what that's talking to, but I'll show you that in a moment. All right, so let's go back. So, but let's say, hey, I really like this typeface. I want to use this. So I'm going to start, do a heading 1, just to give you a demonstration. Headline, stop it. Heading 1, heading 2. Heading 1, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. We're actually going to make this 16. It goes in reverse order. So heading 1 is the biggest heading style, and then it goes down to, I believe, up to 4 or 6 maybe. I'm not sure in Word here. It goes up to, you could probably do more. So I'm gonna, there's that. And I'm going to make this heading 2. I'm going to make that slightly between it. So this is 11 points. The heading is 16, 14. I'm going to do one more. Heading 3. And I'll make that just slightly bigger. Okay. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select the typeface. So let's say, okay, I'm going to make my own style here. So highlight that, and then I'm going to right click up on the style tab, normal, update normal to match selection. Okay. But here's the thing, because I typed all of that as normal, it adjusted everything. So I would have to do that again. So I'm going to go back. So kind of messed that up. So let's see if I did that to heading. Let's say I'm going to change that to public sans. I'm going to change the color back to black. And now I'm going to right click, update heading to match selection. Okay, so now from now on, this is a heading. And if I were to turn that into, say, Times New Roman, I want that to go to heading, I can change it automatically like that. And so I would just repeat that process through all of these. Here's heading 2. I'm going to update heading 2 to match that. Heading 3, even though I'm going to match that. So now whenever, and I believe that there's a way to now, so I can, if you saw that, I don't know, I keep forgetting to put the cursor highlighter on here, but this little tiny box. Anytime you want to know where all the power is behind Microsoft Word, it's these little tiny boxes here. So the styles, and you can really get into the weeds with these, okay? But that's how to update those. And so you make them consistent, and then that's saved. And so I don't believe it carries over to other documents, but I believe that there's a setting on how to do that. Let's see if I can find it. Options. Oh, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time doing this, but you can start to I'll have to look at that and see. Select styles to show and use. Only, yeah, new documents based on this template. So if I were using a brand new document that's using this sort of 8.5 by 11 page, it would, let's see. Let's see if it works. Nope, doesn't, but okay. Going back to this. So there is a way to do it. I just can't remember how to save that. Anyway, so here's the other thing I want to, a couple other things, and we're already getting close to time here. But let me get over to a web page here. Let's going to show you. Okay, this is a lorem ipsum generator, and basically what this does is just generates placeholder text. So if, for example, if you're working on a project and you were trying to get a sense of the layout ahead of time, you could use this to generate artificial. This is all Greek or Latin, so it'll generate that. Gives you three. Copy this, copy it, paste it. Okay. Zoom back out. And so this is a nice, easy way of getting back. Now, here is probably the number one suggestion that I have on a lot of writing, especially in the business writing class. A couple of things. See how this spacing is being added automatically. Okay, so one thing that happens if you add another space, like if you're used to adding spaces manually after paragraphs, you're going to get a pretty big gap between paragraphs. You don't want that. Okay. Again, one of the reasons, just off the top of my head, is that again, that eye strain. Be thinking if you had 3 paragraphs like this in an email, that's a pretty big jump, and it just adds more time for the eyes to drop down. And there's a whole science behind this. Pretty cool. Anyway, so how do we do this? Again, the little option box, these paragraph settings up here, if I click on that, and you're going to see after the spacing, before and after, I can adjust that so that there's nothing there. Okay, I'm going to add that back. Here's another thing that I want to that I've been mentioning a lot. So indentation. So let's do a 0.5. That's nope. We typically do not indent paragraphs that have the spaces between them. Okay, so for example, something like that, and we can automate that by adjusting the tabs up here. So reason being is it's unnecessary to have both. Okay, I believe now the preference for professional writing is not to indent. Okay, so one of the many differences between professional and academic writing, the type of writing you've done at school, we typically do not indent. In fact, we prefer the spaces between those paragraphs. And again, the reason is, if I would go back, think again about the eye strain, all these little movements that we don't even think about anymore. That's making the reader do more work. And so we avoid that whenever we're doing professional writing. Although it feels like it is becoming just more pronounced, more general. Like you see fewer indentations than before, right? So again, if you're not familiar, a nice way to do that is these tabs up here. This way up in this, sorry, this is so tiny. Maybe I can make it a little bit bigger. Nope. Where'd you go? Oh, must have erased it by accident. Okay, so I'm gonna make that normal. Huh. Something's going on here. Oh, it's way. There we go. That's why. All right. So I think that about covers it for now. Let's see if I wanted to do a heading. I could do this. Your heading. Notice again that space that's up on top, This can also be adjusted up here. So it's adding full 12 points. I can't remember how the measurement, how those used to have these little devices that you could make those um, what I've lost it, those conversions, but I don't know how to do that off the top of my head. I want to say it's like anyway. So you can adjust that there as well. And so I might update this to make sure everything matches. And what that's going to do too, so if you have an entire document and you update those settings, it's going to reflect across the entire thing. All right, let's see. A couple more things about style. Let's go. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Not sure what happened there, but okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm hitting a button wrong or this is the heading, this is the normal. Okay, let's zoom in here a bit. Boy, that seems small to me. Something's. Oh, I accidentally hit this little guy here, this subscript, which makes it small, really small. Yep. Okay, so I want to show you lists real quick. Right up here, we've got a bulleted list and we've got a numbered list. Other ways of calling that, we also call these unordered and ordered. Ordered lists you use when the order of that list is not the priority. It should always be intentional and there should be a strategy, but it isn't the focus. Unlike, say, directions, right? So you would, although you wouldn't need this, but it's known that there's some sort of order, like either it's order of priority, let's say directions, but when we do say like highlights on a resume, we use an unordered list. So again, the order of those items in an unordered list should be thoughtful, right? It should make sense. You want to put like on a resume, you want to put your top skill right up in the beginning, right? Whereas maybe some towards the middle there, you're not as uh, um, you don't have quite that same level of expertise. You know what I'm saying? So that's when we would use an unordered list. And there are a bunch of different options up there as well, and you can really get into it's like different marks. Um, Typically, just keeping it simple. And you can also, if you notice up here, the tabs up in this upper little bit, you can adjust the spacing a little bit as well. Okay. So that is some basics of style. I will, one more thing spacing. Spacing and alignment. Alignment left, right. Actually, I'm going to go back to my generator here so I can show you this. Go back to this. All right, so here's cut out a sentence here so you can see it more clearly. I'm going to make this is left justified, centered, right justified, and forced justified. So again, be thinking of the reader, and especially when it comes to professional writing, that effort that it takes to read this. Okay, so if you're looking at this, is going to be much more. You're scanning. Think of the way the eye scans most professional documents is down the left hand margin. So making that left hand margin flush on the side is going to be a lot easier to read than say this. Okay. Regardless of use, we typically do not use this unless it's some sort of design element. Okay. We also typically do not center paragraphs just because it's very makes it even more challenging to read. You do, however, see forced justification here. You can start to see the spacing between the words gets a little wide, and it can get distracting. So, when in doubt, left, flush to the left, you should be good to go. Now, spacing is another one that I uh, comment on quite a bit. Single spaced for professional writing. The only place we ever use double spacing is at school. And that's because us instructors love writing in those spaces between words where no one can read it at all, right? So you get some of this, right? 1.5, you also see that with in certain cases where a document might be a little bit longer, you can see that, but 1.15 gives you a little bit of both of those 1.15 and 1.5. If your typeface starts to look like it's really compressed and getting squished in there, you might want to adjust these a little bit. I will say for this class, if it's too wide, I'm going to let you know. For other classes, maybe take it a little bit more seriously and misinterpret that as trying to pad, say, a paper or whatever. We don't write papers in this class, but you can start to see. But yeah, especially for professional writing, keep it one. If it starts to look too like even this Public Sans typeface, I kind of like it at 1.15 and giving it a little bit of extra room there, a little bit of breathing room. Okay, so that's, I want to say that is, I think that's about it. There is more, there's plenty more we could talk about with regards to style. Let me want to see this. Kind of want to go back and see if I can create a style. So I could create it that way if I wanted to make a new custom one. Anyway, all right, so let's shift over to, I just want to go into Copilot a little bit because we did start talking about this in class, and then I will shift over to Figma a bit. So when we're using Copilot, again, this is using the Microsoft Edge browser. You could probably pull it up in Google Chrome, but Copilot is built into the Edge browser here, and you can see if I pull it up, it gives you the whole deal. Let's say I want to write an email to my boss requesting a day off. All right. And so it gives me this, spits it out. Let's see, I can copy this. See, now the feature that I really miss that you used to have is that you could, whatever this prints out, it would apply to, say, an Office 365 Word page on the screen as well. So if I go over to Word, delete this, new, copy this, come on, copied, it says, paste it, there we go. All right, so number one sign that something has been made with AI, sure, I can help with that. Surprised how often those get left on there. Okay, we don't need that. Okay, here's the subject line. We talked about this in class, 4 or 5 words, really short to the point. I know exactly what if this was an email, I know exactly what this is all about. All right, so here's your subject line, not too worried about that. This is Times New Roman for sure. I hope this message finds you well. I'm writing to request a day off on it due to gives you a list of reasons. I have ensured that all my tasks and responsibilities are up to date, and I am confident that my absence will not affect the team's workflow. If there are any urgent matters, okay, you get it. Now, feel free to adjust the details to fit your situation. All right, so it does a pretty good job of getting it out there. So here, what we're working on this over the next few weeks is thinking, okay, if I'm going to focus on writing emails to my supervisor using Copilot. Okay, so very fast. I'm starting to look at some of the strengths here. Very easy to use. It didn't require me to do a lot of extensive, heavy duty prompting and getting into details, although I could have done a little bit more. Let's see if I can. Okay, revise. So, okay, so asking it. Sure enough, I mean it's really fast. And all it does was is change some of the writing to visit my family, right? So, which wouldn't have taken me a lot of time to do that here. Okay, so tweak that. Now, what we're going to be looking at, and just using this as an example, it's not a great example, but say I'm focusing on writing emails to request time off from my supervisor. Now, using AI, it's very fast, it's very clean, it's very professional looking. Notice that the margins are all on the left. Automatic space after the paragraph is there. Um, Looks pretty good. All I would have to do is change some of these details, and we'd be good to go. Now, um, what's missing here? This is really what we want to start to get to is start to think about those weaknesses and threats. Okay, so when we're talking about internal, so your SWOT analysis will be like strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So the strengths would be very fast, very effective, very efficient. I'm sure everyone will have something similar to that. Some of the weaknesses feels a little vanilla. All right, there's not a whole. It's very, as we saw in the reading, or if you haven't read it yet, or you will see in the reading, that one of the things that we are seeing much more, and this was kind of a given from the get go, but we're already starting to see it where people who use AI all sound the same because AI all sounds the same. And if everyone has access to AI, everyone's going to start sounding identical. And it sounds a lot like this. I have ensured that all my tasks and responsibilities are up to date. And all my, in the dozens of times that I have written emails or notes to request time off, I have never said sounded like that. And in this case, I would expect, so if I were to send this off to my supervisor, they would probably know right off the bat, hey, Chris, and start to think, okay, now we're starting to get somewhere. Here are the weaknesses, and we can start to think, okay, now how about that? Um, shoot, forgetting where I was going with this. The external, let's shift over to external, like your opportunities and threats. So opportunities is that I can send off an email as fast as possible so it doesn't disrupt. It can be more timely. Then I can, what are some of the threats that the supervisor may not be thrilled that did I really do these things? I'm not, how can they be, how can they be sure? Again, the writer, whoever wrote it, whether it's AI or the person's going to be the one that's responsible. We can't chalk it up to and just say, "Oh, AI did it." Sorry, I don't know why it said that. It's not an excuse, all right? We're seeing that all over the place where people are thinking, "Whoa, shoot, I thought that worked," and it's not that efficient yet. So um, you can you can even notice that it's bolded here. I'll go back to Copilot, bolded it here, so there's a little bit of style happening here, but unfortunately you can't. Let's see if we can italicize the second paragraph. Sure enough, that second paragraph being one sentence long, right? So, but it does it, all right? And if I were to copy this it's going to show up, right? There you go. So it's pretty handy that way. It's pretty good. You can tweak it a little bit, but there's a little bit of work that goes into that. It doesn't just, um, again, if I, anyway, let's get back to what we're talking about. So, what the when you start to do your SWOT analysis, be thinking of those areas that you could do a little bit more digging. Next week, we'll start to talk about, okay, how do we conduct research and incorporate it into professional writing, which is slightly different than your typical college essay, right? So, for our purposes, you start to think, okay, how do audiences perceive AI emails? Okay, how much time is actually being saved by writing emails? Is there data on this yet? How are people using AI to write emails? Has it been done? You start to just pay attention to those questions that emerge in your mind as you experiment with these tools. And that's kind of the part that's the most fun, and you should be spending a little bit more time on than you might. Don't do it the last minute, because if you spend some time working with AI, you can start to pick up on some traits and qualities that may not sit well. Some of them are very exciting for sure, but you might start to ask yourself, okay, what is the impact here? How much time do we spend on emails? How much time is AI expected to cut down? How much time does it add? There's no givens here. We're all kind of researching this as we go along. So, all right, that's about an hour. What I'm going to do is stop this, and then I will do another one on Figma. Let's see, what time is it? I might have to do another recording. I'll start one in a minute, but anyway, I'll do that next. All right. Thanks to those of you who joined. I didn't see any questions in chat, but I will post this to the Canvas site. All right. Whew.